Okay. So hi everyone, this is Your Breath YouTube channel, and my name is Brian Murphy, and I work as a Buteyko Breathing Practitioner and also as an Oxygen Advantage coach. And but also I'm interested in all of the different areas of the breath, in the different techniques that are out there, and exploring and looking at how they work and how they are benefiting people. And lucky for me, I know someone really well who's also a Buteyko practitioner and an Oxygen Advantage coach, but he is also trained as a Wim Hof instructor. And today I just want to explore about the Wim Hof Method and how it connects, how for many people it can be confusing when we speak in the Buteyko method about breathing less, and then Wim Hof is connected to a lot of his exercises, or his exercises are connected to hyperventilation. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome you, Leo, to the call, and thank you for taking the time to be with me today, and just to share some information about Wim Hof. So first of all, maybe you could share with us, how did you end up getting into Buteyko Oxygen Advantage and then also becoming a Wim Hof instructor?
Yeah, hi Brian, how are you? Look, I used it, we're now in, what, 2020, so it was about 16 years ago when I studied under Patrick McKeown for the Buteyko method, where I suffered with chronic childhood asthma to the point of spending a total of 6 months in bed when I was about 18 or 19 years of age, taking 3 inhalers a day, 425 prednisolone tablets in a year, and over 12 courses of antibiotics. And it was a point where the doctor said, hey, we can do nothing more for you. You know, there's no hope for you. And after I'd walked out of that office, it was within a month that my mom had contacted me, and she just heard of an advertisement on the radio and said, Leo, look, this breathing technique came to Ireland. It's supposed to be really good for asthmatics. Would you be interested? And I says, yeah, absolutely, throw me on. And the following week we went, and I did Patrick's course in the Buteyko method, which at the time it was structured on a Monday, 3 Mondays in a row. You're taught the essentials of the method itself and the theory behind it. And then you learn both the measurement score, which is that morning control pause, or the bolt score and Oxygen Advantage, same thing. Mm-hmm. And all of the exercises to improve your breath and the lifestyle habits around it. And we're given a training program, train 3 times a day for 20 minutes mm-hmm. until your scores come up and until you get better. And that's what I did for about a year. And after a year, I was completely symptom-free. And I had a consultation with Richard Costello, who's one of the top respiratory consultants in Ireland. And he said to me, Leo, I have heard of I know your teacher, I've heard of the method. It's obvious you know what you're doing. He says, what do you want from me? And I says, I want to come off all my medication. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay. He says, just do it slowly but surely, take your time, and always have it on hand just in case you need it. He says, but yeah, you certainly have my blessing to do it if you need that. And so it took me about 18 months, and I was completely asthma symptom and medication free using the Buteyko method. That was 2004. I then went into all things physical training because sport was what I loved. So I went in and became a fitness instructor, played GAA football up here in Dublin, did judo as well, played judo. And really started through my formative years, really started to decide what it is I wanted to do. And I found that working with people with health issues that wanted to achieve something great in life were the ones I connected with most. So this would be people who had anything from rheumatoid arthritis to Crohn's disease to diabetes and obesity, which came about a lot because I was in a gym setting. But they all wanted to get better, not just for looks, but usually it was to do something cool, whether it was, run 10Ks or run marathons, to perform well in sports, to do adventure pursuits, or just live a great life. Mm-hmm. That's what I started to do, and as I was peeling through that, it kind of came full circle about 6 or 7 years ago, and I had a client who was almost 24 stone, and she trained her heart out with me. She trained up to 5 times a week. She was putting in nutrition practices, and she was getting no results on weight loss. She lost a grand total of 5 pounds in 9 months. And I was pulling my hair out with what to do with her in terms of lifestyle practices that I could help her with, or get support in. And I said to her, look, we're going to have to look at sleep and get a sleep assessment, or we're going to have to look at a psychologist, and we're going to have to look at blood work. What do you want to do? So she fired me. She wasn't. But about 2 months later, she came back to me and she said, Leo, I actually went and got a sleep test. Turns out I have obstructive sleep apnea.
Okay.
I'm on a CPAP. And within the first month of the CPAP, she'd lost, I think it was a goods of about 3 stone, I'm going to say, off the top of my head, from what I remember now. And I was going, whoa, that is incredible. Now, given my background in breathing, I also knew that breathing had a huge role to play in sleep apnea. And I thought, well, she's eventually going to hit a plateau because she hasn't really addressed the underlying issues of the sleep apnea, which she's given herself a good crutch to work with. So that's when I decided to go back and study to become a Buteyko practitioner, because I wanted to help people from the ground level up.
Okay.
And I knew that was one element that I hadn't focused in on getting behind me, the complete knowledge. I had the experience with the knowledge of how to teach people and coach people in this method.
Okay.
And when I was there in my Buteyko qualifications, I met 2 Dutch ladies. You're talking 5-6 years ago, and they had studied with Wim Hof. Now, Wim wasn't known at all in breathing circles. He wasn't known internationally. The Vice documentary, which was the famous one that kind of started to put him on the map, had only come out. But because these ladies were Dutch, he was famous in the Netherlands because he holds this world records.
Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, you know, you get in cold water and you breathe, you be. And I was like, wow, what do you mean?
Wait a minute.
This is not what I know and not what we're doing here. So I was intrigued. I was intrigued by it, so I looked up Wim, came across his videos, his early videos. I was going, this is incredible. And I just got drawn towards it. I was like, hold on, if this guy is able to do all this crazy stuff, and at the time they were starting to research him, and the research started in about 2011, the quality research on him. And the research papers came out kind of, if I'm right, 2013, 2014 was the first big one, which is the endotoxin experiment, where he had shown that breathing and cold immersion you could control your own nervous system using the breathing and the cold exposure, and hence you could control your own immune system. Okay. So in other words, what happened with this guy was they compared him against a group of 16,000 other people who had taken this inert E. coli tablet, which would make you have flu-like symptoms. Okay. And he was the only one to have shown that he didn't get any symptoms. Wow. So no shaking, no vomiting, no cold sweats, no shivers, no temperature, none of that. He got none of it. And the research was like, wow, this is incredible. What's going on? And so they started to pick apart him. I said, look, you're an absolute freak. You can do this. Nobody else can do it. He said, no. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah. And I said, no, you're the Iceman. You know, there's 26 Guinness World Records. There's no way anybody else. He says, you give me the people, I'll train them. We'll bring them back in and test them. Okay. And they said, okay. So he took a group of people away for training, and it was supposed to be for 10 days. And after 4 days, he returned and said, right, they're ready to go. So they're like, okay. So they brought 12 of the group they picked 12, brought them into the lab and tested them the same way they tested him. And every single one of the group got the exact same results as Wim, bar one who had a slight headache. Okay. Wow. So that's huge results. Yeah. They all showed that they were able to control their nervous system and hence their immune systems just through the breathing technique and cold exposure. That's it.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. And like that's kind of was the beginning of your journey of connecting in with Wim then, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I continued all my education with Patrick and did Oxygen Advantage instructor, and I'm actually a master instructor now as part of that program.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to find out what else is going on with breathing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I went down the rabbit hole initially of Wim, and then I thought, hold on, Wim is here and Buteyko's here. What else is out there? Turns out there's tons of other information out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Holotropic and rebirthing and radiance and shamanic breathing. There's coherent breathing and heart rate math breathing, and there's loads and loads and loads of them. And I just started to peel back the techniques one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And then I wanted to go into the research to go, well, how is this actually melding together? How do all these things work, and who do they work for? And that was really my pathway, where I want to understand breathing as a whole, and its effect on the whole body, not just the respiratory system, but the whole human biological system. And then how do I train people to get best results? And what led me down that path kind of was one was my experience in strength and conditioning. You know, I'd worked in methods before where a coach, a really highly respected strength and conditioning coach, would say, oh, this is my way and this is the way you do it. And then you have another coach over this guy telling you something completely different. Like, you know, and I realized a long time ago, you have to work off principles, and how do the techniques fit into the methods, and the methods fit into the principles of training. Okay. And I found that once you understand the principles, then you can apply any method or technique as you wish. Okay. And now it's just about, well, what types of people work well with which techniques and methods.
So that's really kind of where I wanted to go next with this, is because like we could just go back to the beginning of what you shared with us there, was about the lady who was overweight, 24 stone. And that was kind of like your gateway, helping her with her sleep apnea, and your gateway into Buteyko was through that. You'd been a physical trainer before that. So there's certain principles that lady must have applied, or that you taught her about breathing, that improved her sleep and improved her breathing. Like, in really quickly, in simple terms, could you explain what were the principles when you were primarily just doing the Buteyko back then, before you explored Wim Hof? What were the principles you think that allowed her to make that shift?
Well, the first thing is, with her, I didn't actually train her in her breathing. She inspired me to go and learn more about it. She went down the CPAP route, and that route for her. And it was soon after that I moved away. I was over in Canada, and I moved back home and lost touch. Okay. So that's the first thing with her. But I still, by the way, I'm a personal trainer. I'm a personal trainer and a breath coach. So with some people, I look at holistic health and I look at everything, and other people they just want me for the breath work, and that's what I do with them. But no matter what lifestyle disease you have, and I view a lot of diseases from the lens of epigenetics, which is disease manifests because of, yes, your genes, but also your lifestyle. And the problem is, you can't do anything about your genes, but your lifestyle you can do everything about. Yeah. So when you look at people's lifestyles, they go, okay, well, what do people's lifestyles, what do they need to put in to be healthy? And that is, they need to restore natural balance to the body. So they need to move, which I had done through the strength and conditioning personal training. To move, they need to move vigorously, they need to move often. They need to eat good quality foods, they need good quality sleep, they need good quality relationships and mindsets. But actually, at the very, very, very bottom of the pyramid is they need to breathe well. And the reason why they need to breathe well is because it is the only process in the body that, on the one hand, can be subconscious. You don't have to think about it. But on the other hand, is a conscious process that we can take control of. It is the only process that directly we have direct control over the nervous system in. And by controlling the nervous system, we control your nervous system, we control your hormone system. So we affect all of that aspect of our internal body. But also, our breathing also has a role to play and a function to play in movement. So for me, it's the only conscious process, or it's the fundamental conscious process we have to change our entire body and spirit all in one go. It affects everything, everything. And it affects it as quick as you would have taught your guys the 4-6 breathing technique, right?
Yeah.
So within 2 minutes, that 4-6 breathing technique can take you out of a stress response and calm your whole system.
Yeah.
That's been shown in research. Every single time, just by breathing in for 4 and out for 6. In for 4, out for 6. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You repeat that for 2 minutes and you change your state of being.
Yeah.
When you actually train your whole system to be back at its natural center, well, then you don't need to rely on an individual technique so much like 4-6. You don't need to rely on getting yourself out of trouble so much. You just generally have a more stronger sense of well-being, of resilience, of calm within the body. And that's where, with the Buteyko method, that I still feel that Dr. Buteyko was on the money.
Yeah.
In terms of what he wanted from his technique, which was restore a natural breathing rhythm to the body, to restore a strong natural center, where when stress happens to you for 1,000,001 different reasons, your reaction is calm and relaxed.
Okay. And what about the nose breathing as well? Like, I mean, as part of that, would you think, like, obviously we put a lot of focus on that in the Buteyko method, and I teach that, the importance of breathing through your nose, you know, as a rule, as your habitual way of breathing. Obviously, this is something I wanted to explore today was, you know, for small periods of time, there are certain breathing exercises where you breathe through your mouth, but what we're looking at with Buteyko is how are you breathing day in, day out, and that's what I'm sharing on my videos. Would you agree that the nose breathing is something of importance there as well? Obviously, as a Buteyko practitioner, you've been taught that as well.
It's not only Buteyko, it's now coming from functional orthodontistry, myofunctional therapy.
Yeah.
It's coming from looking historically at the development of human anatomy.
Yeah.
I mean, breathe through your nose. If you don't breathe through your nose, you have no sense of smell. If you have no sense of smell, you've got a decreased sense of taste, a sense of hearing, and eyesight. Straight off. You also have low sexual libido. You also have an inability to diaphragm. I mean, why would you eliminate one of your senses? It doesn't make sense. Go around, do what James Nestor did in his book. Go around for 10 days with your nose completely blocked and see how you feel. It won't take very long for you to go, holy shit, this is incredible.
Not good.
So, no, it's not. Like, imagine, that's like asking a person who walks around on one leg the whole time, and they have the ability to walk around on 2 legs, and then expect them not to have any compensation patterns, not to get any sore knee or sore back or sore spine. Like, why would you not use the anatomy you've been given?
I understand. Yeah, definitely.
So for me, yeah, absolutely. The difference between Wim Hof and Buteyko in this sense is Wim Hof is a technique. It is a specific period of time, and it wants to do something specifically with it. It wants to get a result from that technique. What we're talking about here is your daily breathing habit. That's completely different. And in that case, absolutely, you want to restore nasal breathing. Nasal breathing is just a part and parcel of a quality breathing pattern.
Yeah.
And George Catlin went back in 1882 and he made an analogy. He says, breathing through your mouth is like taking a glass of dirty pond water, so scooping up dirty water from the bottom of a pond and drinking it back. He says that's what mouth breathing is for your health, versus nose breathing, which, as we know, cleans and filters the air, it moistens the air, it prepares it for the body, it regulates carbon dioxide, it enhances nitric oxide, it does loads and loads of amazing processes. So it just makes complete sense to me to restore nasal breathing as a
your
foundation.
habitual way of breathing through your nose. And for me, the Buteyko technique changed my life because I had been suffering from chronic nasal congestion from early childhood, I would say. But I just remember, especially my teenage years, just literally saying like, my nose was blocked all the time. So I think I always had an awareness as a young boy that it was better to breathe through my nose, but I found it difficult a lot of the time, and it got worse as I got older, and it was really affecting my quality of life. So definitely, that's what I've been sharing through my work that I've been doing. Just the importance of nose breathing, the importance of breathing less is something we look at, and that's just something I want to explore with you as well. That on a day-to-day basis, the Buteyko technique looks at nose breathing as a rule and training you to breathe less volume of air to access, what we call the Bohr effect. And I've just released a video about that, to allow for better oxygenation within your body. Now, for people out there who might be a little bit confused, how does that sit and how does that work with the fact that the Wim Hof method? So when I'm teaching my courses, I'm explaining to people, you need to learn to breathe through your nose as a rule, like just nose breathing, and you need to learn to breathe less as a rule, volume of air, and that's better. And then people say, well, but Wim Hof is training us to breathe more air by hyperventilating. So can you just help with a bit of a bit of a deeper understanding of how both of those ways of breathing can be both beneficial potentially?
There's the old saying, which is many roads lead to Rome, right? Yes. So I did say that I want to restore more a natural center to your breathing system. I did say that we want to restore nose breathing as a habit. Yeah. But how you do it, you can do it many, many, many different ways. And that's where the Buteyko method, in my view, is lacking. It is one way. And it's a very powerful way. And it was the way that I cured my asthma. And I cured it, by the way, eliminating all symptoms and medication. That's all it is. And I have a lot of affinity for it as well. But in my early days as a trainer, when I was coaching breathing, in my early Buteyko practitioner days, I also realized that some people don't like the Buteyko method. They just can't get their heads around doing breath holding techniques. They don't, when they do the techniques, they get very anxious and panicky, and it's not for them. And so they drop out of the program. And I always said, I at least want the ability to be able to coach someone no matter who they are. As long as they have a desire to get better, I want to have the skill set to be able to coach them. And that was a part of the stimulus which led me down the Wim Hof Method instructor training, was because I was coming across people online that were not getting results with Buteyko, but they were with Wim Hof. And I'm talking, these are anecdotal, these are not lab-based or research-based subjects. These are anecdotal. But they were saying that I'd done Buteyko, didn't like it all, did Wim Hof, loved it, and now I've got no more asthma. Now I've cured like mental disorders. I have a friend who was bipolar. He was on 5 medications for bipolar disease. No more medication. I have other people that have helped symptoms like fibromyalgia, that have helped Crohn's disease, that have helped depression. I've one friend that was actually suicidal. And the big game changer, when I say suicidal, as in he tried to commit suicide a couple of times. Big game changer for him was the Wim Hof method. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. So what is it? If from a respiratory point of view, we want to restore center,
yes,
and we have Buteyko on one side, which says, hey, do it by breath holding and do it by breath calming. And we have another technique, which isn't, the goal of Wim Hof isn't to restore breathing patterns, but it can do that just by default. And people are getting amazing health benefits from Wim Hof. I was going, well, where do they cross over? Where do they merge? How do both paths lead to Rome? How do both paths lead to So to understand that, we often look at Buteyko from a respiratory physiology perspective. In other words, we look at it from the lungs and the physiology of the lungs, like the Bohr effect, right? But for me to understand Wim Hof, you actually have to look at it from a neurophysiology perspective. And you got to look at it almost from a HRV point of view.
Okay.
Okay. So I know you've done a little bit of talking, so I just want to unpack HRV a little bit for people, right? HRV, or heart rate variability, measures the distance from, or the speed of one heartbeat to the next. And you want to see a big variability in heartbeats. The more, if you think of it like if you watch the old ER movie, the old ER series, when somebody's about to die in ER, it's like beep, 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 beep. So the more flatlined you become, the less variability you have in your, from heartbeat to heartbeat, then the more stressed you are. Okay, that's what the heart rate variability measures. And the reason why they do that is because the thing that innervates the heart is your nervous system. So they found the more variability you have, the more parasympathetic or relaxation you have in your body. And the more flatlined you are, the more stressed your body is, or aroused your body is, fight or flight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you want to have a very strong ability or a high tone for rest. In other words, the shit hits a fan, you're in the middle of an argument, you want to be able to stay relaxed. And then you also want to be able to use your body when you need to. You need to be able to get out and dodge. A mugger is coming up to attack you with a knife. You want to be able to get out of there. You want to run as fast as you can, yeah? But the problem is that with our current lifestyles, which when I say current lifestyles, I'm talking about, we have the big C virus is going around at the minute, the coronavirus. You have poor air quality, poor food quality, sedentary lifestyles, living indoors 90% of our time, lack of movement, and disconnection from other human beings. The list on and on, financial stress, technological stress, like the list just goes on. And we weren't designed for this type of stress. So all these things end up setting you into a high stress state, or that fight or flight mode. Okay? The ideal is that you want to have a strong center that you can use both systems. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So yeah, so you're able to switch gears when you need to. Just so I'm clarifying that I'm understanding it correctly, that you're able to really switch gears. If, as you say, if a mugger is coming up and got a knife and gonna bug you, you gotta be able to get out of there. So that's a certain shifting into the sympathetic state to do that. But in general, you want to spend as much time as possible in the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, which I've spoken about in another video on the channel, about the rest and digest part of your system in your body to heal and restore you. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem becomes is when you're under chronic stress, loads of stress for a long time, you end up moving away from this natural central balance between the two systems to becoming more stuck in a high sympathetic tone or a high stress state, okay? When that happens, it's like if you're driving your car and you're at the traffic lights and you have your car in third gear and the lights turn green and you put your foot to the floor to the accelerator, it's like, you're not going anywhere, yeah? That's what happens when you're in a high stress state, is when you need to turn on, you don't have the ability to turn on it. In other words, when you need to wake up in the morning, you can't wake up because, it's just so hard. Like, and it takes you 2 and 3 hours to wake up in the morning. Or if you're in sports, you need to, you need to be from the first whistle, bum, 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 go. But instead, you need to get a second wind and it takes you 15 minutes to get into the game. That tells me you're stuck in a high stress state, okay?
Yeah.
Now, to get you out of that stress state, you can do calming techniques and parasympathetic based techniques to relax you down and take you down. We know what I'm talking about here, right? This is the Buteyko method.
Yeah.
This is sleeping. This is meditation. This is heat training. All of these things directly relax you down. Okay? Or you can also do a more stressful exercise technique. And the result of experiencing more stress means you will bounce back into a relaxed state.
Wow.
The equivalent of this is, let's say, high intensity interval training. People do it. It's a stressful training method, right? Working out really hard. But how do you feel afterwards? You're like, oh man, I just want to go to sleep. I feel great. From a breathing point of view, that's what Wim Hof is.
Okay.
From a breathing point of view, it's a more stressful breathing pattern, but it drops you back into a relaxation state.
Okay.
And when you practice that breathing technique over, for some people it's in one session, for others it's over a period of time. What happens then for the rest of the day is the rest of the day their breathing calms down. Their breathing rate slows. Their breathing volume slows. Their whole system comes back into its natural center, and all of a sudden, all of those disease ailments and symptoms and signs that they had start to relax down, and the person feels amazing.
That's really interesting because and that's really fascinating, Leo. Because for me, you know, I put so much focus on when I'm giving my Buteyko courses about the importance of, you know, breathing through your nose and keeping your mouth closed. So when I give the kids courses, which I love doing, is training the kids to breathe through their nose. And the question they have to ask themselves, I always say, the question you have to ask yourself during the week is my mouth closed, you know? But from what you're sharing with me there, you know, when you do, I love the analogy you used about like Wim Hof is like the high intensity version of breathing. That's really, that makes total sense to me. And we'll talk a little bit later about cold immersion as well, about the water, cold water, which would have a similar kind of effect, I would say, because it's a stressor. But the fact that then you drop back down into parasympathetic after stress state of the high intensity would encourage you naturally to keep your mouth closed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of times I've also come across a lot of people in Wim Hof circles who they've found amazing benefits, but not all the benefits. They still have little issues going on. And then they put in nose breathing where they focus on nose breathing night, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, this is the world. And I'm like, yes! Yeah, because now you're working with principles. The goal is just to get to Rome. I don't care how we get there as long as you're happy getting there.
Yeah, I love the idea of sharing about the principles, because, you know, principles are like, they don't shift, you know, there's like, as in, if certain principles are there and they're there for a reason scientifically.
Well, the old poem is methods are many, principles are few, methods may change, principles rarely do.
Really good.
So there's a reason a principle is a rarely changing phenomena, and it's been shown time and time. You have them in sports training the whole time. The principle of is specificity, of recovery, of individualization, of periodizing. Like these are all they're established, and you try to challenge them and you'll find out that actually the principle holds true the whole time.
Like,
so
say,
what we're just looking at from a breathing point of view is, if you only look at breathing from a respiratory physiology point of view, a respiratory system point of view, then Buteyko is the only one that makes sense. But we're not just a pair of lungs. We are a whole human being. So we have to, when we look at the effects of breathing from our whole body and our whole spirit's point of view, now you can understand how these other techniques can transfer into the benefits that you also see from the Buteyko method.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So looking at it holistically allows for more kind of like bridges to be, you know, built, I suppose. Considering we're talking about building roads to Rome, we could use that analogy.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you know,
look at Buteyko. Buteyko, we do talk a little bit about nutrition and about sleep, yeah? So we do that because we know that if we don't fix those things, then the breathing is going to suffer anyway.
yeah,
So wouldn't it be true to look at it from the opposite way around too? That every single system impacts your breathing system.
yeah,
So you can use, so when you change your breathing pattern, it also impacts every single part of your body and your spirit. And it just so happens that some people need the benefits to come from their brain and their nervous system as opposed to from their lungs. Their lungs might be perfectly okay, but they're just seeing seeing the reflection of their ill health in their lungs.
yeah. So they're requiring a different kind of key to open the door, basically, to their,
Yeah.
they're getting their homeostasis and balance back in their body, and you know, feeling well. And so yeah, the next thing I want to ask you, go ahead.
Let me give you one other thing is, Wim Hof and Buteyko aren't the end of the story either.
No, of course
because
not.
there's still people who suffer with breathing because they haven't fixed the whole problem yet. And I'm talking particularly about people whose physical tissues, their muscles are shut down. In sports training, we'd say retracted. It's like taking a pair of jeans out of the washing machine, out of the dryer, and putting them on you. They're stiff, right? So you can't move well in them. Well, if the muscles, you can't move well in them, then you know you can't use the full capacity of that movement. So I'm talking about like a squat. You put a pair of jeans out of the dryer and try and squat on them, it's really stiff and it doesn't feel nice and you can't do it. Well, it's the same with your breathing muscles. Your diaphragm can become retracted. Your intercostals can become retracted. Your neck muscles can become hypertonic. And when the muscular system starts to retract and hold that tension in it, I don't care what breath holding you do, you won't fix the problem. And even with the Wim Hof method, you won't fix the problem necessarily. You now have to employ techniques that address a retracted diaphragm or chest muscles or throat muscles in order to free up that part of the system.
Yeah, just as you share that now, what's coming into my mind is James Nestor's book, and was it Stowe? Was it that man called Stowe, I think, who was he was going into the hospitals.
Carl Stowe, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, that's because my memory from I listened to the audio book during the summer is that you know, he was doing a bit of that type of palpations and palpitations, palpating, yeah, not palpitations, palpating the muscles, and so really speaking to you today has been really fascinating, because it's just that it opens up the fact that there's, as you say, many ways to get to Rome, but there are basic principles. And so the principle of nose breathing is solid. The principle of, you know, bringing your body, whichever way you do it, into homeostasis and relaxation, parasympathetic.
We'll call it autonomic balance is what it would be referred to in HRV training. Autonomic when you're looking at it from a strength and conditioning perspective, yeah.
So that's really, and it's really, hopefully it kind of clears a little bit of confusion about, you know, when we're teaching the Buteyko, we're saying, you know, do it this way, and then there's other ways. But it's like saying, yeah, I had a friend, for example, who was a runner, and he said to run fast on the short distance helps you run the longer runs as well. So the longer runs help the shorter runs help with the longer runs. So he was like a half marathon runner, but he was saying like doing the quick 1K, 3K runs were helping him with the longer run, but the longer runs were helping. And this kind of reminds me, it's just come into my mind, that kind of reminds me of what we're talking about today, that as long as your intention is to go on your journey on the road to Rome to health, that they're, you know, having the willingness to explore how you can get there. And everybody is different. Everyone has a different way of getting to their way of healing. And, you know, you've connected in too with mindset, for example, is a big part of the Wim Hof Method. And, you know, you can't separate out your mindset from your physical body and from your breath. And I just was wondering, the next thing I was going to ask you about is, you know, the connection between the cold therapy of Wim Hof's method, which from what I understand, when Buteyko first taught the method in Russia and Siberia, or in the Ukraine, wasn't it? Get it right. That was kind of encouraged back then as well, the cold therapy. As far as I know, there was an element of that with it. Like, there has been, people have shared that it was, but Wim Hof puts a big focus on the cold therapy. How do you see, like, the connection between the breath and the cold therapy, and how they're interlinked and how they can benefit a person? This is for anybody out there who's going for their sea swims during the winter, like I do every Saturday. I love swimming in the sea and I feel great for the rest of the day. But why is that?
Well, first of all, was it in the Buteyko method, and why isn't currently taught? It was originally because it was a part of that culture. Yeah. It's a part of the Eastern European and the Russian cultures to have saunas and get in the roll around in the snow. Yeah. And to expose their babies to cold exposure. That was just part of their culture. I know when I spoke to Patrick about it on an Instagram live, Patrick McKeown about it on Instagram live, I asked him that question. Why wasn't the cold? And he says, well, look, people back in 2004 thought I was already crazy enough speaking about breathing. If I tried and get them to then get into the cold, they would just think I'm off my rockers. And I completely agree with them. Yeah. You know, even today, it's only since these lockdowns have happened that it's becoming more of a common practice, right? So then why did Wim get into? Remember, Dr. Buteyko's focus was to restore health, and the health of the breathing system in particular. Wim's was not. Wim came across his method through cold exposure. So Wim studied philosophy and philosophy and different religious practices from the age of 7. Right, he didn't just happen upon this stuff. Then, you know, he found one day, as he says, he was called into the cold. Remember, he lived off the grid for about 9 years as well, and that instilled in him a lot of creativity, and it didn't confine him to the norms of society. And because of that, he listened to his intuition a lot, and he listened to, you know, what his signals from his bodies were saying. And as he said, he was walking by a lake in Amsterdam one day, and he got a call to go into the cold, and he went in. And he felt it was just absolutely incredible. It was an amazing relief. And so he then started to practice that. And as he practiced that, he noticed how his breathing rhythm changed in the cold. As you said, the cold is a stressor. It's an innate stressor to absolutely every human being. And so our natural reaction to stress is to go, that's our natural reaction. So he noticed this, so he says, And with all of his background into yoga and meditation and Western philosophy, so he started to do this practice before he got into the cold, in a controlled environment. And then, of course, he started to put his head under in the ice water, and he realized, oh my God, this is an absolutely incredible experience. It just feels amazing. And then he started to build that into his breath practice. And all of a sudden now he had this amazing breathing practice with this amazing cold exposure, and he just felt wonderful for it. You got to remember then, a big turning point in his life was his wife committed suicide. His wife was schizophrenic and committed suicide. And he had to raise his 4 children. And the only relief he got from the depression and from the heaviness of his life was through the cold exposure and the breathing. So for years he did it as a way of relieving that pressure on him. And eventually what happened was, as he was one day in Amsterdam, and he was doing his normal swim, and there was a TV crew there I think they were doing a nature program. But there was a guy walking his dog on the frozen lake, and the dog fell into the frozen lake. And Wim jumped in, rescued the dog, pulled him out. The camera crew caught it all on TV. They're like, whoa, this is amazing. So it then went around and circulated around local media first and national media, and then the media started to come towards him, and then they started to challenge him. Well, Wim, what do you think? Could you do this in the cold? Could you do that in the cold? And that's what set him off on his path of 26 Guinness World Records, was challenges from the media and from different private organizations going, wow, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do the other? And then he turned to look at the health aspects of it and go, well, you know, it's been this, forget about the performance end, it's made this much of a game changer to me health-wise, I wonder what's going on. That's when he turned to the science of it, and he turned to looking to promote the method around the world. Okay. And we got to remember, we live 90% of our days indoors. Okay, so we live in a temperate environment, and you know when you're indoors, you got the heating on. You're in the car, you got the heating on. You're in an office, it's a regulated temperature. You go outside, you wear hats, you now wear Under Armour clothes, you wear jackets, you wear scarves. We don't like the cold because it's bloody cold. It's a stressor. But if you strip away, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? There's another principle for you. So if you don't use your body's own ability to heat itself up, you lose that ability. Now, what goes into heating up your body? The cardiovascular system has a big role to play. The nervous system has a big role to play. And your respiratory system has a big role to play. So too, by the way, does your thyroid, right? So if you're not as a human being regulating your temperature naturally, well, then you start to lose its function, which leads to a decreased ability of your cardiovascular system. And then at the far end leads to cardiovascular disease. It decreases your, or puts more stress on your nervous system, which then sets you into a more stressful response chronically. So it has all of these adaptations because we just don't get cold anymore. So the whole idea of cold exposure as a therapy is to gradually introduce you back to the cold, so that your own body can help regulate its own temperature. Okay. Now, the Wim Hof method just so happens does that very powerfully and potently with their breathing technique. And it's also been shown in science how it does that. But you could apply any breathing method across the board to do that in their own way. The whole point is that when you do cold exposure, whether it's a sea swim, cold water, ice water, an air bath, which is basically going out without your jacket on and your scarf on. Any of these forms of cold training, the key thing is to be able to remain calm. And what is the key process in remaining calm? Breathing calmly through your nose. So that's where cold training comes in across the board for all human beings. But you just have to be careful. If you can regulate your breathing when you're at rest, then you go and do cold training on top of that. You're not going to get the insights, and you're not going to develop the way you want to develop from it. In other words, you're going to cause yourself more harm than good. Yeah. So and that's why for me the breathing is more important to do first, to get that right, to restore your breathing, and then to use the cold training to help that, and then to use the cold training to help the rest of your body improve. So yeah, so we've talked a lot about principles today, and it's just the principle of being able, of the breath itself, like the breath, right? So, what's more important than our breath? And then, so as a marker, when I get into the cold water, sea swimming, which I've been doing up until last Saturday, and because I'm trained in the Buteyko technique, I'm able to just gently breathe in and out through my nose, and then I know I'm not stressing myself too much, Then I know that there is a stress response because it is cold. It's very cold in the water at the moment, but I'm already getting used to it now. It's only 10 degrees at the minute, Brian. When it gets down to 5.5 degrees in the Irish Sea. Whew, yeah, that's chilly. That could be interesting. Well, it's just another challenge. It's another level. It's like putting another set of weights on your bar and lifting a heavier weight. It's the exact same thing.
and just building it up gradually. If you know, if it does get colder, maybe spending less time in there. But for me, the marker, you know, like the marker is the breath. If my breath is still quite relaxing through my nose, because I'm training Buteyko and that's what I teach, I'm pretty confident. But like, yeah, it's just so interesting how all the systems play out and interact with each other, and how they're all connected to our general health. Like, it's not just one system, they're all working together holistically.
Always.
Yeah. So it's been really
It
interesting.
just so happens that breathing is at the center of the whole process.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
And breathing's at the center. I agree with you there, Leo. And that's why I wanted to speak to you today, to explore, you know, because there are so many different breathing techniques, and just to explore about how the breath can be looked at from different angles, and it is so important, and how, you know, creating wellness in your body, you need to look at your breath as part of that journey if you want to get well. Anybody who's chronically mouth breathing, or you know yourself, you had severe asthma, anybody who's not even paying attention to their breathing, like, for me, awareness is the first most important step. And you know, like, the Buteyko technique is all about awareness of the breath, awareness of breathing through your nose, keeping your mouth closed. Wim Hof's technique is all about awareness of the breath as well, because you're giving it that attention for that specific amount of time every day. And then there's all the physiological things that are happening too. But it is the willingness to pay attention to your breath is a starting point. Would you agree with that? Or what do you think?
Yes, willingness, which is desire. Desire is born out of either you're suffering in enough pain or you care enough about health. And they're the only two motivators for you to change.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where it all begins, is what do you really, really, really want? Because no matter what route you take, it's going to be a lifetime's work.
Yeah, the process.
It's gonna take years for you to unpack, and the amount of people that I come across who are like, oh, you know, I want to be healthy, and they don't want to put 6 months work into it. I'm like, sorry, like you've lived unhealthily for 15 years at least.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to rectify that in a breathing session or in 6 weeks, and it is like I still work on it today.
Yeah.
Still working. I don't need to put as much attention onto it because I've raised my baseline so high that it's not necessary. But for what I want in life, I still experience big stressors in life. I still challenge myself. That's all part of life. And as you do that, the body creaks. So it's just becoming aware then of, oh, my body's creaking. I'm willing then to go back and do the hard work to make sure it's back up to scratch.
Stay with the process. And so yeah, that's the process is the goal. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that amazing information today, Leo. It's been really fascinating. And
beautiful.
There is, like, the process is the goal, and there's many roads that lead to Rome. And you know, but you don't get to Rome by just saying, oh, there's a road to Rome. You've got to actually walk that road. So to go on that journey. So it's a journey. The breath, you know, exploring the breath is a journey, and improving your health is a journey. And the more you can know about it, the better. I think that's my opinion on that. And so I really appreciate knowing more now than I did an hour ago about the breath, even more, and about everything, to, you know, how it can be understood from different angles. And it's been really great. So thanks very much, Leo. And I'll see you soon.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Take care, Leo. Have a great day. Bye.
Sean.
Sean.